Hello, welcome to the Crypto Morning News. I am your host, Taylor. Rate cuts are looming for the United States Federal Reserve, but rate hikes are on the menu for the Japanese central bank, and that is causing quite a stir in the markets. Along with that, there was an exploit in an Ethereum DeFi ecosystem, and we'll take a look at all of that. Um, things are looking very precarious right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to head lower for crypto assets. Let's go ahead and jump on over to the sentiment for today. So the sentiment is a test lower after an initial bounce. I'll do a little bit of technical analysis here in a few minutes. Fear and greed is at 24. That's still extreme fear, but we're improving upon the last 2 weeks where we had lower prints for fear and greed. 25 basis point cut is now 90% likely. Don't believe me? Check it out here. Let's refresh here. 89% we get a 25 basis point cut. That is pretty crazy. That's where we're at. I didn't expect it to get that certain, but that is where we're at. And I should provide the context is that November 20th and November 14th, we were in a different spot where it was actually more likely that the Fed would not cut rates, that they would actually pause rates. So this is good. This is the good outcome. We want this as risk takers in the market. Market focus, the U.S. Federal Reserve quantitative tightening policy ends today. So that has happened, and that is probably why we're seeing a lot of the bears' last-ditch efforts to try to bring prices lower. It's because what's happening today, what has already happened, it happened at 8 a.m., what has happened today is very bullish. Now, it's not something that's going to see immediate movement on the charts, because essentially what this is that the Federal Reserve is now stopping selling bonds into the market, right? So that is what the end of QT is, but that is very significant because when the Federal Reserve sells bonds into the market, it extracts capital from the market and restricts the flow of money, makes money more expensive. This is quantitative tightening. That's what tightening is. It is designed to reduce inflation. Okay. So let's keep moving. Why crypto dump? We talked about this in the intro here. I'll go into a little bit more detail. The YETH product, this is from Yearn Finance, kind of in the balancer ecosystem, it seems. I'm not really spending a whole lot of time there analyzing that stuff, but and apparently they aren't either, because the product was exploited for $3 million. I'm not exactly sure what the technical, sometimes I know this quickly, what the technical issue was that was exploited. This time I did not get that deep into the research. It's also a fairly small number, 3 million. Exploits have been much larger than that. This is not a number that you want to see, but it's not that big. And so I think that's why we did see a sell-off across crypto. That is a big part of it. Yen carry trade unwind fears. When the value of the yen rises against the dollar, it forces repayments of loans and a liquidity draw out of U.S. markets. That's what we're seeing happening today. We're seeing markets going in ahead and starting to price in what could happen over in Japan. And in a lot of ways, the Japanese asset classes are already pricing that in as well. So that's something that that's going to be a developing story and is probably not over. Right, that's probably just begun. The question is what assets will remain resilient during this period of transition for the Japanese central bank, and which assets will not be resilient, which assets will be the ones to sell to try to get off your balance sheet. In my opinion, it's not crypto to sell because crypto is already oversold. I think if there is going to be a major movement in prices, it's probably going to be on the equity side in names that are overbought. But let me just make clear, there's also a chance that this doesn't happen, right? The carry trade kind of normalizes, and there's not as much money being made there through the carry trade, but it just kind of stays where it's at. That is also a possibility, and it's also a possibility that the yen carry trade goes through the full unwind, but U.S. asset prices don't see a huge sell-off because of the power of the earnings and the promise behind what those assets can do. I think that's pretty unlikely, right? That's extremely optimistic. But that is a possibility. 2025 has been the year of things not making sense for equities, and equities just pushing higher. Bullish vibes. We did have some bullish things coming on this week. The first spot Chainlink ETF is expected to launch this week. Very, very cool there. That's exciting. Last week, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana ETFs had net inflows. All right, we'll go look at this really quickly here. So this is Bitcoin, and they make it so small. But if you look here at the weekly, we very, very small, but we did get a weekly histogram close there for the weekly. That is net. Oh, you can't see it. Now you can see it. That is net inflows for the week of 1128. So there you go. That's Bitcoin. For Ethereum, on the weekly, this is weekly net inflows. Okay, so the ETFs bought the dip. I wouldn't say they bought it very aggressively, but they bought the dip last week, and it makes sense because that's where Bitcoin started to bottom, right? In this period here, the ETFs. So the ETFs would have been just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting, but once we started to get consistently higher lows and higher highs, and then we finally got a breakout, right? And there's all kinds of technical things happening under the hood that made this even more bullish. There was an overall rotation back into ETFs, which is good. Now we're seeing a sell-off. That's not good, but I don't think that has much to do with ETF inflows, because ETF inflows gave the bulls what they needed to keep trudging forward. I'll come back to TA. Let me wrap up here on the ETF inflows. Solana. This is what Solana looked like on the daily. I don't what the weekly is just all green. But one thing you'll notice here is that Solana got its first daily outflow. So the 26th of November last week was the first time that Solana ETF traders actually had a deficit, meaning they sold more than they bought. I don't know what you're going to do with that data point. I mean, other than it's just the streak has ended, but this is still an amazing opening for the Solana ETFs. XRP ETF, we'll go ahead and look at this here. It looks like it hasn't broken its streak of green days. Weekly, obviously going to be green. Okay, back to the sentiment. That's really good, though. Paying attention to the ETFs is super key. In 2025, the main buyers of digital assets have been digital asset treasury companies and these ETFs, right? So the ETFs now are expanding, right? And that could have an interesting effect on Bitcoin dominance, but that's ultimately what we're seeing. So paying attention to those two. When I say major buyers, I mean new major buyers coming to the table. These ETFs, as well as the digital asset treasury companies, which by that I mean BMNR, Bitminer. Tom Lee is a big champion of that, and to some extent Microstrategy. But then they've been at the table for a long time. They were the first digital asset treasury company, maybe not the very first, but functionally they're the first major one that kind of operates under what now all these other digital asset treasury companies are looking to copy. Okay, bullish vibes continued. IBIT options raised to 1 million contracts, the same liquidity tier as major global equity benchmarks. Okay, this basically means that big boys want to trade in the Bitcoin options market more aggressively. So was deemed an expansion from, I believe, the CME was the ones made that decision. Either it would have been the CME or the NASDAQ, but I think it was the CME. Actually, you know what? I think that was the SEC. So it was actually a U.S. regulator. I think it was the SEC. I'm not sure about that. But either way, the contracts were expanded to 1 million. Moving on, BlackRock Strategic Income Opportunities portfolio increased IBIT positions by 14%. Okay, so BlackRock bought the dip, and it's not just their ETF that bought the dip. Their actual strategic ETF bought the dip. So not IBIT, not the one that just buys Bitcoin for clients that are holding IBIT. their strategic income opportunities portfolio. Think like S&P 500. It's not the S&P 500, but it's similar to that that they're curating for their clients. It's hard to make the distinction of how that's different from IBIT, but it is. There's two different ETFs there. And the fact that Bitcoin Strategic Income Opportunities is adding IBIT ETF is very bullish for Bitcoin long term, because it just shows that the biggest boys are continuing to buy Bitcoin derivative ETFs. Looking ahead, we actually have a decent amount here. December 1st today, QT ends. We also get the manufacturing PMI final. That'll be coming out today around 10:30, I think it is. I'm not sure about that time. December 4th, jobless claims are going to print. The expectation is 220. Previously, it was 216. So this is an opportunity. Again, labor for risk takers, you want labor news to be unfavorable. So this is an opportunity for the expectations to exceed the previous and the print to exceed both, obviously, and that would be favorable towards the outcome in December. However, with an 89% likelihood, that was 90% this morning, I don't know that there's going to be much data that shakes it unless this number comes in just extremely favorable for labor. December 6th, PCE, 11 a.m. Expectation was 2.8. Previous was 2.8. So, you want that to be lower. You want inflation to keep coming down. December 10th, FOMC decision. That's going to be a big day. And then Supreme Court ruling on tariffs. That still is to come. Don't have a date for that quite yet. Asia was mixed. All right. Let's look at the charts here. Microstrategy also added to its position. But in the spirit of holiday here, MicroStrategy is MicroStrategy, the stock, let me make clear, the common stock, ticker MSTR, is starting to make its way onto my naughty list, meaning I don't know if continuing to hold MSTR is the right thing to do. Now, I know that sounds bad, but the problem with MSTR, and again, this isn't something I've acted on just yet, but it may happen today. I may sell MicroStrategy today, the stock. Why? Well, because MicroStrategy, it's not because they're going to sell Bitcoin. I don't think MicroStrategy would sell Bitcoin. I think they're going to continue to buy Bitcoin because that's what they do. I think the problem, though, is that there's been a shift of what makes sense to hold in terms of the entity that is MicroStrategy, because they have so many products now. They're offering so many specifically called preferred products that are, just to use a kind of a blunt financial term, they're somewhat dilutive to the common stock for MicroStrategy. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. Just think about it like this. Every company issues a stock. Every publicly traded company in the New York Stock Exchange, whether it be Amazon, Microsoft, or MicroStrategy, they have a common stock. Well, there's also other stocks that may not be available to the public markets. Essentially, those other stocks for MicroStrategy are much more attractive at this point in time. And some of the moves that they've made recently signal to the markets that they are prioritizing their preferred shares over the MicroStrategy shares. Okay, so I might as well go ahead and show you guys MicroStrategy since I've been talking about it so much here. So MicroStrategy down 6% today. This is, if it candle closes here, this will be, I think this is already a 52-week low. I think I got that notification this morning. So MicroStrategy stock, again, not doing great. Let's go back to Bitcoin, though. Bitcoin is holding some support here. I'm on the 4-hour. I won't be on the 4-hour very long, but if you look here quickly, you can kind of see that Bitcoin is holding. It has the chance to continue to hold above this level here, 86.2, which I believe is not super significant, but we did find support on it back here. We had the candles close back here as well. If I go out to the weekly, which is kind of where I've been camped out for a while, not for any specific reason, but this, I'm not the TA guy. So to the extent that I'm going to do TA, I like to do it pretty zoomed out. I've had this box drawn. If you guys know why I have it drawn, you know. If you know, you know. But I'm not going to explain it again. This is just a good box that I think that we should hold, and it's also kind of coincides with the 100-day moving average, or 100 weekly moving average, I should say. That's the red line here, as well as the uptrending line of support that goes back quite a ways here. So if I shut off the SMAs, you can see this one just kind of goes back. We had a major tap back here in September 2nd, 2024. So the good news is we're holding this confluence of level kind of right around 85, above 85, call it 84. So that's good. If I look at the MACD on the weekly, I'm still not seeing that curvature quite yet. And that's what I want to see. That's what investors really want to see. That's not the all end all be all. That's just one indicator. If I look at the neuro wave from flow signals, I'm getting something that is actually extremely encouraging, extremely bullish. And if you've made it this far into the video, you'll be rewarded for seeing this. This is a green delta that's printed. Now we're in a new week. So I believe we have a decent amount of time before this candle closes. So this delta could be swept away. This is how I believe that these indicators work. But the current printing of this delta, is bullish, and I think it's bullish because the last time that we see these deltas print, if I collapse cutting to the chase is that these green deltas are bullish, and we just got one printed. But if you go back and you look, the last one was actually at the very beginning of kind of the sideways action into the bear market. So not bullish in the sense that like it shot higher from there, but that was actually a very good time to start accumulating Bitcoin. And then here, this was before a pretty big move to the upside. And again, I'm on the weekly, but this was a 43% move that it predicted there. And then here it predicted kind of the middle of the bull market when it moved then 140, call it 139, 140 percent back to the upside. So this could be the signaling of the reversal back to the upside that investors really want to see, because if we start printing weekly candles below this uptrending line of support, I'm not saying that would further prove that we're in a bear market, but that would convince some investors that Bitcoin is in a bear market, right? So that's not what we want to see. It may be what we see, and then we will have to adjust accordingly. But if we're able to start to print higher candles, higher highs and higher lows from here, that is going to bring more confidence to investors, and they're going to look at it and say, okay, well, there's some abnormalities here with Bitcoin's price action. It gave up some levels. It gave up some important SMA levels. However, it's pushing higher. I don't want to be left behind. I want to get in, right? So that's the sentiment ultimately that bulls are trying to spin up here. Whether or not it's going to hold, not really sure. And you might be listening to me and saying, well, it sounds like you're describing like a sales pitch, like the bulls are trying to pitch this to the market. In a sense, it is kind of like that. And the shorter the time frame you're looking at, whether you're on the daily, the 4-hour, the hourly, the 5-minute, the lower the time frame, the more it is a sales pitch. Hey, buy this. It's discounted, and maybe it's a good pitch. You can buy it here and then sell it higher, or maybe it's a sales pitch of buy this because I want to get out because I think it's going to go lower. But the longer the time frame that you're in, it's less of a sales pitch, and it's more of the charts just telling you what it is, just telling you how the markets are weighting this asset. So for me, I'm continuing to buy. I talked about how I'm considering selling MicroStrategy. That has almost nothing to do with my short to midterm kind of feelings, bullish, bearish, my sentiment for Bitcoin, the underlying. But for MicroStrategies, the stock, I just have a different perspective on it. All right. that's about it. Covered the yen carry trade, cover the Yearn finance exploit. Um, you know, this those two things happening at the same time at a time where Bitcoin is not quite convinced investors that it's ready to launch back and go back and test 100 or maybe all-time highs. That's very convenient, right? And so I don't want to draw a clear line of the conspiracy like that's the only explanation for why we've gotten these two events. I mean, the yen carry trade, that is, I don't think that the Japanese central bank really cares too much about Bitcoin's price action. Um, but that one was going to happen. That one is happening. It's an unwind, and that, to the extent that that's a today headline, is very limited. The reason why it's a today headline is because over the weekend, I can't remember which dated bond it was, but let's say the Japanese 10-year bond moved up 1% in a 24-hour period, and that's not great, right? That's quite a bit. So it's kind of pricing in that there's going to be a hike for this Japanese central bank. So that's, I don't think that's coincidence. I think that's just one of the headlines that we get. That was been going to come out, and now we got it. I think the exploit, though, was probably timed to be able to exacerbate the bearishness of this moment. So just be aware of that. That doesn't mean that my ability to overcome that and to say, hey, despite those things happening, I'm still going to be a net buyer of digital assets. Just because I'm confident in that doesn't mean that you should be, right? That goes to how everybody's portfolio is different, right? How everybody's risk tolerances are different, and how they're positioned in the market, and different things like that. So I'm continuing to buy digital assets. I bought last week, and I told you all which ones I bought. Mainly focused on Solana, Ethereum, and Bitcoin at this point in time, right? But there are great opportunities further out the risk curve too. You just have to be much more selective. Obviously, I think Chainlink's really good, but I have a lot of Chainlink already, right? And so the ones that I'm kind of buying are Aave and Uniswap, right? Because I think those are really good for what they are in terms of Ethereum DeFi, right? Solid Ethereum DeFi. And there was even a thought in my mind over the weekend as we saw that Yearn finance hack exploit that, is there a possibility that there's some actors in the background that want certain Ethereum DeFi ecosystems to win, to be advantaged over others? And could it be that that's why we saw the Yearn finance exploit and not a Aave or a Uniswap exploit? Again, that's very conspiratorial. More likely, the answer is that it's just exploiters, hackers are going to hack, right? And they found an exploit and they seized it at a time when sentiment was going to turn back bearish. So those are my thoughts overall. Hope you all have a good start to your week. Crux is saying, yo, morning. We saw Yori, crazy fingers. Aaron MD, Afojo, Angel of CV, Kenny G. What's up, Kenny G? Lincoln Harris said, "Hey Shrum, I'd like to diversify into stocks. Which ones do you recommend? The only stocks I have is MSTR." Okay. Well, I'm not a financial advisor, and stocks are securities. So if just make that distinction. When we talk about cryptos are not securities. So people can say whatever they want, and it can't really be financial advice. When it comes to stocks, it can be. So just take that into consideration. I think the average person looking into the stock market today actually has kind of a, thank you, Silent. Hope you're doing well, Silent. The average person actually has quite a bit of a difficulty right now with stocks because a lot of stuff is overbought, right? But it's very difficult to know if the AI stocks are actually overbought because they really do have so much promise with what they can produce, with what their revolutionary alien technology can produce. The question really is there going to be a major breakthrough in AI technology where AI technology produces some kind of extreme value to humanity and that's observable and measurable, is that going to happen before a potential popping of the bubble, right? With the overvaluation of these assets. And it's really a very well balanced question because it's is AI worth its salt, right? Or is it just a really cool technology that may never do great things? Um, I think, but my opinion is only so important when it comes to AI because I'm not an AI stock analyst. I have some. And to answer your question quickly, I think CoreWeave is pretty decent. I think it's pretty underbought. And I think that if AI does go forward and has some big splashes that are undeniable and investors have to take advantage of that, or they're going to feel left behind, I think CoreWeave is going to benefit. But you look at a name like NVIDIA, and it's going to, it's just plowed forward and continued to do very well. I don't own an NVIDIA. I sold some NVIDIA, all the NVIDIA I had this year, because I think we're transitioning now into a phase where the competitors to NVIDIA are going to do pretty well as it becomes very clear what their CEOs should lead the companies to do. I'm thinking of names like Qualcomm and AMD, right? Those are names that, if you zoom out on those charts, they are very highly valued overall. But if you look at them more recently, they are undervalued compared to NVIDIA on like a short term type of comparison. Tesla, another kind of very interesting name, but what you need to understand as a stock investor too is something called price to earnings ratios. PDE ratios are very important to understand, but they're not the end all be all. I mean, I think Tesla's PDE is in the multiple hundreds, right? But what that means is that you're buying something that is almost definition of overextended, right? But does that mean that it needs to correct? Does that mean that it needs to come back in? And I don't know that the answer is yes to that. So again, this is why I think being a stock investor is actually somewhat difficult, but it's but yeah, I think those names are decent. A name that I've been kind of thinking over, but I think has too much debt for me to enter is Target. TGT is the ticker. Target's interesting because they just signed a deal with OpenAI, and I think if they're going to have some kind of magical success with AI, that it could happen in the next 2 to 3 quarters, and you're buying a stock that's pretty undervalued versus the rest of the market. That's Target. So that's interesting, but they have a ton of debt, right? I'm not a huge fan of buying debt. And then you have Palantir and you have Robinhood. Palantir and Robinhood are, I think, going to continue to be the shining stars of the stock market outside of the mega cap tech stocks. So I really like those names. And the mega cap tech stocks like Google and Amazon, while they look super overvalued, you have to remember that Berkshire Hathaway just entered a $4 billion position into Google in a time where Google is arguably very overextended, right? So the big takeaway for stocks is that AI may be one of the most special narratives that we've seen since the invention of, you know, uh, computers and the internet. But is it going to actually deliver higher profits to Google, to Amazon, to Tesla, to Microsoft, to um, Palantir, right? Intel. Is it actually going to generate real value over the mid to long term, or is it just kind of a promise play that's going to have to come back and see a significant 20, 30, 50% correction in the sector overall? And that's just something I don't know. Everybody's trying to speculate on that, right? It seems like the headline of CNBC website every day is saying yes or no. It just toggles back and forth. So it's an ongoing debate in the stock market, obviously. My hunch is that even though the prices are elevated right now, after spending as much time in the crypto market as I have, I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be a pullback for AI stocks. Um, and, and at the point where everybody is convinced that AI stocks were in a bubble and then that bubble has popped and you better get out because it's just going to go lower, then AI is going to cure cancer, right? Or create a major movement forward in nuclear fusion, right? Or something like this. So I think by the time that one of these companies knows, tells us that they have done something extremely significant and delivered extreme value to humanity, there's probably going to have been a major correction. So that's the way that I think about it. I do DCA into AI stocks, but I don't claim to know them better than the average, equity analyst out there. Moonshine said Powell was going to have a meeting this morning. Any news on this? I think it was actually scheduled for 9 p.m. So my guess on that is that probably it's in California, or maybe it's even in Hawaii. But yes, he does. Yeah. So if you look on this calendar here, his meeting is at 9 p.m. today. So I don't know. I mean, they are ending quantitative tightening today. So maybe he does mention some things about that. But there's also a chance. Yeah, it's an important question. Let's see where he's speaking. Let's see what the context is. To get central bank's policy. Yeah, not really sure. Probably could find it, but I don't want to take everybody's time with this if I don't know. Okay, is scheduled to speak at the Hoover Institution's George P. Schultz Memorial Lecture Series. Okay, so and Hoover Institute could be in Nevada. I don't know, but that explains why it's so late in the day. My guess is that this is not going to be that big of a speech. There might be a moment or two like that we get a quotation that makes its way onto major crypto Twitter accounts and things, but I think what this probably is going to be more than anything is just in case the market dumps or does something gets extremely volatile, he'll be able to say he has a scheduled thing where he can come out and say some stuff. But probably the market's not going to be that volatile today, and he'll just lecture on some boring esoteric Federal Reserve thing. That's kind of my reading of this. AFFSOC said, "Hey brother Shrum, I have joined you guys' channel last Friday and wanted to know if you have any live sessions with members where I can ask questions." Well, I mean, you're in one right now. You can ask questions here. Yeah, and then Rufio has live sessions as well, and then Tim has live sessions as well. And all the scheduling for those should be in the Discord. So you guys can find that information there. But welcome to the trading community. Yeah, it's a bearish sentiment time right now, but that just means that probably it's always darkest before the dawn, right? It's kind of the thought that comes to mind there. MP said, MPB or MP Better Life said, "Yeah, thanks for the BF deal. Been listening to you guys for almost a year. Nice to be a member." Heck yeah, Black Friday deal. Absolutely. Absolutely. Hope you guys took advantage of that. Yeah, cool guys. All right, well, we'll do this tomorrow. Hope you all have a great rest of your day and happy trading. Keep those stop losses tight. Adios.